Okay, good morning. I'll continue to add folks as they enter the chat throughout. But my name is Ryan Trapp. I am the Director of Marketing Communications with VRLTA. I want to thank the folks who were able to sign on and join us this morning. For those of you who have not met her yet, I also wanted to give a brief shout out to Kayla Cleveland, who's on the call. She is our new chapter and events manager. So welcome, Kayla. We're happy to have her on the team here. Be seeing a lot more of her face on future webinars and future events as well. So excited to have her on the team. I also wanted to introduce, we have Keith, Carly, and Hanya from Seasonal Connect. They're going to go over their webinar today, Real Solutions for Staffing, which is highlighting the seasonal workers and opportunities that they have both in the United States and also here in Virginia in particular. So just to recap, we will be recording this and we will post this online and share out the resources after the fact, as well as some additional resources that the Seasonal Connect team has that won't be on this call, but are helpful to our members to have as well. So with that, if you guys want to take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be part of your association. Carly and I were actually talking yesterday as we were getting ready for this, that it just feels like we've really been welcomed with open arms. So thank you all for making us feel so welcome. This relationship is still so new for us, but it's already been very impactful. One other thing before I get into this, it's funny, I was logging in just now to Zoom to join this webinar, and I had this flashback to COVID that just was not fun. But it's funny, this is when I think everyone realized, that period of time was when I think everyone realized how much of a staffing crisis we're in. And it's wild that we're still having the same conversations and talking through the same issues, because the staffing crisis just isn't going anywhere. And Carly will give you some stats on that as we go. So with that, let us introduce ourselves. Carly, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to VRLTA for having us. We're really excited. My name is Carly Eglin. I am the co-founder and COO at Seasonal Connect. I've worked with Keith for about 8 years now, and I've been in the hospitality space for over 15 years. I live in central Massachusetts, but I grew up on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and so very seasonal there. And I was actually a seasonal worker in my younger days. So definitely have a couple of different perspectives of the industry.
And my name is Keith Pabian. I serve as the CEO at Seasonal Connect, and also I am the founding partner, it's weird to say that still, but of this law firm that I'll tell you about in a second. But I also live in Massachusetts. I went to, the closest I've been to Virginia in terms of where I've lived is when I went to law school in Philadelphia, but been to Virginia many times as a tourist, I guess. But I've worked with hospitality now for well over 10 years, guiding everybody through different aspects of immigration, but also staffing. So this is what we do, and it's fun to be able to talk through this. So in terms of our partnership, so we are officially partners with VRLA. And as part of that, you get so many opportunities with Seasonal Connect. We're going to walk you through what that is. We're going to give you a discount code later to sign up. But we're so excited to be part of this. And I'm excited to meet many of you in person over the many coming months and years. But again, thank you for having us. Really, I will say, we deal with staffing day in and day out at both of our companies. And so anything you ever need, just consider us a resource. We're here to help with whatever you need, whether or not you end up needing our services. Just please consider us a resource. Let us help. Now, let us explain our two companies, because it also kind of gives us a roadmap of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm actually going to start with the company on the bottom, which is Pabian Law, which is the law firm that I was alluding to. So Pabian Law is a law firm that I started over 10 years ago. We've grown from 4 employees to 53 all over the country. During COVID, we went very remote. And so we're all over the country. We work with clients in every state of the country at this point. About 90% of our business is H-2B visas, which I'm going to talk about. The other 10% is year-round options like TNs, O's, green cards. Again, I'll explain what these mean in a few minutes. Seasonal Connect is an entirely separate company. Seasonal Connect, and we'll give you a lot more specifics on this at the end, but it's a software platform where it basically does three things. One is it provides you an opportunity to do employer-to-employer recruiting. So if you are summer season in Virginia, it allows you to search for winter season properties, whether they're ski mountains, whether they're in South Florida, South Arizona. It allows you to find them, recruit with them, learn from them, collaborate with them. You can also search directly for workers that want to work in hospitality and at seasonal jobs. And then the third thing is a lot of education and collaboration. Seasonal Connect, though, completely separate from the law firm. You'll see when you go into Seasonal Connect, there's not a thing about the law firm because we don't care if you do immigration. If you do immigration, it doesn't matter if you work with the law firm. They are truly two separate entities. That being said, for the rest of this webinar, we're going to use both of the companies so that we can really give you some background on different staffing options. For today, Carly is going to essentially represent Seasonal Connect and give you all of these staffing options that aren't about international workers. I'm going to play the role of immigration lawyer, and I'm going to basically speak from the Pabian law side and tell you how you can use internationals if you want to do so. So now that I've set the stage, I'm going to stop talking and turn this over to Carly to talk through the non-international side of this.
All right, so let's talk about finding the workers. So what happened to all of the workers? I'm going to read some statistics just because a lot of this has changed with the pandemic. As we all know, the pandemic came. A lot of things shifted. A lot of people were furloughed or laid off. And in the hospitality industry in particular, a lot of people have not come back. So since COVID, unemployment rates are down to 3.5% after a high unemployment rate of 14.7% in April of 2020. So that just shows us that people have returned to their jobs and a lot of them haven't come back to hospitality. Also, there's been a decrease in people attending hospitality schools. So in general, there's 1 million less students enrolled in college since the pandemic, where minimum wage has increased by 15%. They're making more money, and it's more appealing than furthering their education. Hospitality programs can expect a 1 or 2 year decline in enrollment, and it's largely due to public relations, the problem of long hours, low pay, and demanding guests. Also working weekends, and there's a stigma that there's a lack of flexibility in the schedules. That being said, there's also been a lot of people moving to the gig economy. They want that flexibility. They want the ability to be with their family and their friends and to make their own schedule. And so it also allows people to search longer for their next job if they are laid off. They have more of a cushion and they have options for bringing in that income. But the gig economy itself is expected to grow by 17% per year. So that's something that the pandemic really did accelerate and really drove people to take advantage of. Another thing we need to look at is that hotels have occupancy rates that are growing. So this is expected to reach a 63.8% occupancy rate, which was down to 43.9% in 2020. So the occupancy rate is increasing, but the workers seem to be in other industries or doing gig work.
Carly, what you just said is important though. So, because one of the things that you and I hear a lot when we're talking to employers is, where did the workers go? And it's not necessarily that they left hospitality, it's that they've moved into the gig side is where we're seeing a lot of the attrition. Like that's what those numbers really show. And we've seen that anecdotally as well.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about finding the workers. What are the potential recruitment methods to find the workers? The first is to recruit locally. So, the state of Virginia, but also when recruiting locally, talking to your staff and seeing who they can refer. Your employees really do know your organization well and know who might be successful working at your organization. So talking with them and seeing if they can recommend anyone. Also working with recruiters and taking advantage of contract labor, providing your existing staff with overtime, and increasing benefits to those existing workers. We highly recommend looking at your benefits package regularly and a minimum of annually. We're seeing that since the pandemic, employers are constantly evaluating their benefits packages, and they really are shifting and being upgraded and revamped since the pandemic. Also focusing on retention, making sure that your current staff is happy and wants to stick around. I always say it's much easier to retain than to fill a role and train from the beginning. So if you're able to retain them, that will make it a little bit easier for you to stay staffed. Looking at international workers as well, which Keith is going to touch on in a moment. Looking at how you can incorporate those gig workers into your staffing plan. So as I just mentioned, a lot of workers have gone to the gig industry. So instead of seeing that as a negative, looking at how you can build that into your recruitment plan and still capture those workers and still make them part of your team. Also looking at an alternative workforce, which I'll touch on in a little bit, but this includes populations like the recently incarcerated, retirees, and the differently abled populations. And then a shared workforce as well, which we'll get into in a little bit. But essentially, our biggest tip is don't put all of your eggs into one basket. And really, don't be afraid to get creative, try new things, and branch outside of your comfort zone a little bit. Especially since the pandemic, we're seeing a lot of employers trying new things and kind of puzzle piecing things together rather than sticking with one recruitment method.
Okay, so I'm going to talk for a little bit about utilizing international workers, because when you go back to actually, I'm going to go back because I have control here. When you go back to this list that Carly just talked through, so many of you guys are already doing this, right? You're already recruiting locally. You're asking your staff for referrals. If you're not, you should. Contract labor is so freaking expensive, and international workers are probably going to be cheaper here. Overtime is a blessing and a curse, right? You want to offer some, but you don't want to crush yourself and your workers and your budget with too much. But again, you guys are already doing this, and with 3.5% unemployment, that doesn't seem to be shifting month to month. More and more organizations are looking at utilizing international workers. One of the things that's changed through the years, even just year to year at this point, is we're getting calls now from metropolitan and urban hotels and restaurants where we didn't get those calls before. It used to be much more in the seasonal areas, right, at the beach. And what's happening is more and more of you are turning to internationals because it's the only way to really, it's seemingly the only way to find workers that want to work in larger numbers. Okay, so let's talk through some options here. And also, I will tell you, I could talk for hours on this. I'm going to talk very briefly. So if you have any questions, if you want more resources, just reach out. We have so many recorded webinars, including the basics on each of one of these things and so on. So the way that the U.S. immigration system is structured is there's so many different visa types, and they all start with different letters and are followed by a number. But in reality, there's not that many options. So I'm going to talk in a little bit of length in a moment about J1s and H2Bs. Those are absolutely the backbone of hospitality from an international staffing standpoint. There are year-round options as well, and some of these are getting less popular, some are getting more. I want to touch on these briefly because I want you to by touching on these, first of all, they're getting some of these you're starting to get emails about, so I think this will be helpful to understand this. The other thing is it'll show you as we go through these 4 things why the J1 and H2B are so central to international staffing. So H1Bs used to be very popular in hospitality. H1Bs are this year-round option. You get it for 3 years. It sounds wonderful. In reality, it's awful. You have to show that the job requires a bachelor's degree and that the person who you're sponsoring has a bachelor's degree in the field that is related to the job. So basically, you would want to show the person has a bachelor's in hospitality, and then the government would say to you, but this job doesn't really require a bachelor's degree. The government has made it more and more difficult in the almost 20 years that I've been involved with immigration law. They have made it more and more difficult every single year to get H-1Bs. I will tell you, they actually just announced a proposed rule yesterday, which would actually make it a little bit easier, but I still try to talk our hospitality clients out of it. It's a very frustrating, expensive process at this point for your industry. That being said, there's some actually decent ones. So if you're a lodging property, not a restaurant, but if you are a hotel, the TN visa can be really helpful for you for managers. So TNs are only available for Canadians and Mexicans. It came through the NAFTA treaty. But if someone is a Canadian or Mexican citizen and you want to hire them for a managerial, or if you have a golf course, like an agronomy job, as long as you're a hotel, it's actually a great opportunity. And some of the recruiters are starting to go out there and finding qualified applicants. So that's something to absolutely consider if you're a hotel. If you're a restaurant, nothing here. It won't work. The E3 and H1B1 visa is very similar to the H1B. E3s are for Australians, H1B ones are for Chileans and Singapore nationals. Don't do it. It sounds great, but again, they're going to want to see the bachelor's degree, and it's going to be an uphill battle. The O1 can be great if you're trying to hire a general manager or chef. The O1 is made for people who have shown that they've reached the top of their field in one country, in their home country, in a foreign country, in the United States. It doesn't matter. It's not about your best staff member. It's about the one who's achieved things. But if someone's worked at a really great hotel, a really great restaurant that has won a lot of awards, you can attribute some of those awards back to the international worker. All right. But when you're looking at these 4 options, you need to know who the worker is. It's kind of a one by one. Most of them I'm going to try to talk you out of, right? That's the year-round options. Conversely, I'm going to talk about green cards when we get to the end of this little immigration piece, but that's actually easier to get than most of the year-round options at this point. But before we get there, let me explain. So again, the year-round options are based on one person, right? It's not a fit for a large group. The following 2 visas are made more for groups to actually solve staffing problems. So the J1 visa is the first one. The J1 visa, in a lot of ways, is a wonderful entry point into the world of international workers. It's most of the workers, almost all the workers pay their way, so it's not an added cost to your property. But the J1 visa, it's essentially a student visa. These are going to be kids who are coming in, it's their first job in hospitality oftentimes. A lot of them are here to have fun and to have an experience, not necessarily to work their butts off. But what I see is that where I look at the J1 is it's kind of replaced the high school and college kids that aren't here as much as they were 10, 20 years ago. It goes through the State Department, and what happens is these third-party companies get accredited by the State Department to administer these programs. We don't do J1s. I'm happy to always talk about them. I would absolutely look at them, but it's not where you're going to get your higher end workers. It's more, again, like these entry level people that want to come most of the time for 4 months tops. So they're really here for the heart of your season. All right. Conversely, the H-2B is a work visa. It was designed to allow workers to come to the United States, stay in the United States, work for employers, and do substantive work so long as you can show seasonality. The key to H-2Bs is that you have to prove that your property is seasonal. But what seasonal actually means is that you're seasonal for up to 10 months of the year. So you can have a super long season. And as long as your revenue, expenses, and staffing drop for 2 months of the year, you qualify for H-2Bs. So seasonal is misleading because as long as you can show a bell curve, even if that bell curve is 10 months in duration, you qualify as seasonal. Most of the process, almost all of the process, is based on the job category that you're filing for. So let's say you need line cooks, or you need housekeepers, or you need front desk agents, or dishwashers. The entire application process up until the very end is based on that job category. That's also how the cost works. Everything's based off of that job category. You apply every year, so it becomes a part of your annual process. It also becomes part of your annual budget because this is an added cost to you. This isn't like J1s where the workers pay their way. I will tell you, for most of you, it's going to be a lot more affordable than you think. You know, like you're looking at probably about like 8,000 to 10,000 per job category, maybe a little bit more depending on how many workers you sponsor. But you apply every year, and that's going to be a budget cost every year. On the other side of that, applying every year can be a godsend because you can make tweaks year to year. You can change the numbers, you can change the positions, you can change the dates. You don't have to apply every year. You can apply, you can pick when you need staff. And then at the end of the process, the workers can always transfer to you from another property in the country. So let's say you have a summer season, they can come to you from South Florida on an H-2B visa. Whether they can come from outside the country is a different issue that I'll explain in a second. There are a lot of requirements with H-2B visas, okay? So this is a legal requirement, or it's a legal process, I should say, with legal requirements, legal obligations, and legal consequences if you don't follow the rules. So there are wage requirements, there's hours requirements, there's mandates about how much you can charge back to employees and what you can charge to employees. It's really just housing. You have to get people to Virginia for the start of the season. You might have to get them home. Ultimately, what the government's looking for is that you're going to be treating the U.S. workers that are working in the same roles as the H-2Bs the same as the H-2Bs and vice versa. You have to treat the people doing the jobs the same, whether they're an H-2B or an American. And again, there's a lot of compliance mandates. The good news is a lot of you are already paying above the wage rates that are required. Most of you are. The other thing is you're doing this to get staff. So the rules don't scare me as long as you understand what the rules are and you teach your managers and supervisors what they need to do. So don't let the compliance side scare you. Just make sure that you are committed to being compliant if you do this. All right. H-2B visas are more popular than ever before because it allows you to staff all of these jobs and more because the workers want to work. There's no such thing as an H-2B job. It's really whatever job you have at your property. But you get a sense here of what we're seeing in the hospitality industry, including with our ski clients. All right. Now, housing is not required to be provided to the workers, but it's funny, Carly actually spoke on a webinar yesterday about this. But from a practical standpoint, if I'm moving to Virginia, right, I travel all the time. I'm very comfortable with it. If I were coming to work for one of you, I'm still going to ask the question of where am I going to live and how am I going to get to work? Imagine if you're from another country, they're definitely going to want to know that answer. So you're not required to provide housing or daily transportation to your work site, but you're going to need to be able to answer that question, especially because H-2Bs are more competitive than ever, which also means the recruitment of the workers is more competitive than ever. Okay. Now, it's a big process. The process is long. We start 6.5 months before employer start dates. So out of all the things I'm talking about on the immigration side on this webinar, this is the most important thing I'm going to tell you. It's all about your start date. And whatever your start date is going to fall into one of these two buckets. If your start date is in April, May, or June, you need to start the process in mid-September. If you are winter season, meaning your start date's October, November, December, you need to start April 1st. Most of you in Virginia are going to fall into that summer season. So mid-September each year is when we start the applications for summer season clients. All right. Now, the other thing is, it's funny, I'm laughing because when I do these big H-2B webinars, this is multiple slides that I'm condensing into a very short thing. There is a numerical cap for H-2B visas that is the bane of many summer employers' existence. So there's this numerical cap that was built into the H-2B program by Congress. And what it said is that there's only 66,000 H-2B visas available each year, split into summer season and winter season. But that only applies to workers coming from outside the country. So if you have, if you're a summer season organization and you're insistent on getting workers from outside the country, this cap is standing in your way and it creates so much uncertainty. It creates so many problems in the process. And so many of our clients have moved towards looking at in-country workers, those workers that are working. Again, most of you are summer season. So when you're looking at in-country, those workers are working in South Florida, they're working in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tucson, in Arizona, or they're working in ski country, right? They're working in Colorado, Utah, New England, and so on. If you're going to look at the H-2B program, and even if you've already been involved, I cannot stress enough how much in-country H-2Bs are a solution here. So really consider them. It takes so much of the uncertainty away from the program. The other thing is, if you're going to do H-2Bs, it's much easier than I think a lot of organizations think it will be, but it's all about planning and it's all about meeting deadlines and asking questions. But you got to plan ahead. You have to be organized. You need to have a strategy here. And that's frankly one of the things that I love doing most. But the more that you do that, the more successful you're going to be with this program. All right, some final updates on the H2B program. More interest than ever before because it's a program where you can say, I need line cooks. I can't find line cooks. I need 10 line cooks, and you can apply for 10 line cooks, right? I mean, that's why this is so popular. The problem right now, though, is the cap, right, is a big issue because there's more demand, and the more people that apply, the less odds that you're going to be able to get these out-of-country workers because there's that set limit of 66,000. There's also delays at the government because they're not used to seeing so many applications. And it's also created this competitive in-country recruiting market. Also, the government historically has added more visas every year to the 66,000, but because of all the there's so many words I could use here, but because of all the craziness and incompetency at our federal government, where right now we don't even have a House Speaker, the cap relief is also delayed and it's uncertain this year. So that being best options, especially in Virginia, where you guys have such a long season because your weather is so much nicer than it is here up in Boston. But you have to plan ahead, and the more you're looking at those in-country workers, the more absolutely look at TNs. I think that's a real opportunity for most of you. But outside of that, there's so much discretion, and the government has such bias against hospitality, especially when you have to prove that the job requires a bachelor's degree. All year-round options are so fact-specific, and that creates other issues. But the green card is also there. And just like a lot of you are getting these emails right now about TNs, you're also seeing this thing that a lot of you are seeing these emails about EB3 visas, which I think is so disingenuous when you're getting these emails because it's misleading. EB3 is a green card route. It's not a visa, and it's expensive. There's a lot of different compliance mandates and also procedural requirements on an organization when you're sponsoring somebody. Also, once a person has a green card, they can leave and go work at any other employer in the country. It's the right opportunity for some, and I said this before, it's actually easier to get a green card through that EB3 route than it is through most of the year-round options, but it's not the right fit for everybody. It's really only a great fit either for a long-time hire that you just want to help them have a future here, or I think even more impactfully, when you have someone that you see being able to move up to a managerial role and you can sponsor them for the green card. But just be careful if you're seeing if you're seeing emails about immigration options that look too good to be true, I will tell you they're probably too good to be true. All right. So in closing on the international side, should you utilize international workers? Maybe. Probably I would if I were most of you, but I would do it consciously. I would do it with a plan. I wouldn't just go into it kind of haphazardly. I would definitely make sure that you are speaking to somebody where you're really mapping out a plan for your property to make sure that this is going to be successful. And as I said at the beginning, this is not a marketing pitch. I'm happy to be a resource just to bounce ideas off of if any of you have them. Have any questions, I should say. So that is a very abbreviated kind of introduction to immigration, an update on immigration. It's there if you want it. I'm here to talk to you about it if you want to know anything. But Carly, going back to you on other things.
Thank you so much. So as we spoke about earlier, we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. So as we saw with Keith, immigration is an option for a lot of you. And whether it's an option for you or not, don't lose sight of that alternative workforce that I mentioned earlier. You can see Andy Doyle here. He works at Pabian Law. He's been there for almost 7 years now. And he is part of the differently abled community. And he is absolutely critical to our operations team. We couldn't do it without him. And so definitely, a population that I think people overlook sometimes, but is definitely worth exploring. Also, not forgetting about the recently incarcerated and retirees. There is a growing trend of seniors joining the hospitality industry, and just the general age in the hospitality industry tends to be a little older. So 71% of hospitality workers are 40 years or older.
The other thing on the recently incarcerated is I know that there's a number of states that are doing programs to get people back into the workforce. So it's also something just to reach out and see if in the state of Virginia, there's some opportunities. I know in Massachusetts, there's a big workforce training program to really get people out there and back into jobs when they're released.
So let's talk a little bit more about the shared in-country recruiting model. Keith spoke a little bit about how it works. Again, you will have your organization, and then you're looking for a partner that has the opposite season to your own. Oh, can you hear me okay? All right.
Yep.
Sorry about that. And so if you're a summer season organization, you are looking for a winter season partner. So the staff working at your winter season partner, they're already doing the jobs. We'll talk a little bit more about how you find that partner and how you make sure the partner is a good fit for you. But assuming that the partner is a good fit and you've worked out the logistics, you know that those workers are essentially to a point vetted for the work that you need them to do as well. So when that winter season ends, those workers will then transfer to your organization for the summer. And this is not just the international workers. I know Keith touched on the in-country H-2B workers. It does very much include them, but we're also seeing this work with Americans, especially through a seasonal connect now. We're seeing this more than ever. There is Americans are a real option for seasonal organizations. Now, again, they are harder, more difficult to find, but they do exist. And that's where that employer to employer, the opposite season partnerships really are critical to allowing the Americans to find jobs for both seasons. All right, so how do we create those successful partnerships that I mentioned? You're going to want to talk with your partner about logistics. You're going to want to set expectations, and you want to be on the same page as your partner. Too often we find that organizations don't talk about these things, and it creates a messy situation. So what should you ask a potential partner? You want to know about their needs as well as the culture at their organization. We find that workers tend to be happier and come back season after season if the culture is similar amongst the partners. Talk with your partner about housing. Again, Keith mentioned this a little bit, and I was just talking about this yesterday, but housing is a challenge. We've heard from workers that aside from their wages, housing is the top thing that they're worried about. And again, aside from the wages, housing is a barrier for them if employers don't offer it to them, or at least offer assistance in finding it. Also talking with your partner about pay. So what do they pay their workers? But aside from that, what is the cost of living where they are? So it may be less expensive to live in one area of the country, and then so the wages may be lower, but then the wages could be higher where your organization is, but the cost of living could also be higher. So not only talking about that with your partner, but also talking with your partner about how do you communicate that to the workers and allow them to see the bigger picture with the cost of living built in and not just the dollar figure on the hourly wage. You also want to talk to your partner about what is important to them, and oftentimes it is the length of their season, which brings me to the next point. So talking with your partner about if your dates overlap, how are you going to deal with that? So if I am a summer season employer in Virginia, my season may start April 15th, and then I might end my season November 1st. And then my partner's season may start October 15th. So again, we have that we both need workers for the season. And so this is one of the critical logistics to talk about. And figure out with your partner, because this is where it can get messy. So talking about before you really enter this partnership and before the workers are getting ready to be I, as a summer season, could let them go on October 15th, even though my season goes another 15 days. But then my partner could let them go 2 weeks early at the end of their winter season. So just finding out what works for you and the organization you're looking to partner with. Also talking about how are the managers involved. We'll talk about this in a moment, but you want to make sure everyone's on the same page. You want to make sure the managers are invested. A lot of this comes down to communication with not only the partner property, but the managers, and the managers communicating with the workers. And then talking about how you plan to recruit the workers, when you plan to recruit the workers are going to happen as well. So let's talk about hiring and retention a little bit more. When you are recruiting for your own organization, you want to think through some questions that are really important. So the first is, when does hiring start at your organization for your season? This is something that really has shifted since the pandemic, and as the years go on, we're seeing this more and more. People are recruiting year round. Now, of course, that ebbs and flows, and it can really ramp up about 4 or 5 months in advance, but people are now talking year round. They're looking for these partners year round, and that is allowing them to recruit workers in larger numbers rather than finding one worker, interviewing them, and bringing them on. So they're able to partner, and they could say, say we both have housekeepers. My partner may have 10 housekeepers that can come my way. So it would allow me to recruit in larger numbers that way. But that kind of recruiting really does take a lot more commitment throughout the year. Also looking at how your organization competes with other organizations that are offering higher wages or better benefits. So if that's not something that you can offer, your wages might be a little bit lower, or your benefits package might not be as robust. Where can you make up for that? Looking at things like housing, looking at things like the culture, looking at things like other opportunities that you've created for your workers that can kind of supplement these things. And then also talking about, how do you keep candidates while they are accepting or deliberating a job offer? So part of this is that we see workers for seasonal jobs sometimes accept, and then they actually jump ship at the last second. So looking at how do you try to prevent that? A lot of this boils down to communication, keeping them in the loop, and just being really clear from the beginning when you're actually talking with the candidates. So some more recruitment tips. It's very important that you involve your team. Everyone needs to be on the same page. So involving the same staff that would normally be part of hiring. So if you have managers on your team that are typically part of hiring, making sure that they're still involved in these conversations about these partnerships. And if you're working with international workers, making sure that they're involved there as well. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but you want buy-in from the managers. Managers really, really, really have to be on the same page. They have to be engaged, and they have to be working with you to recruit and to continue the messaging so that you're retaining those workers season after season as well. It's your job to treat them as part of the team, and making sure that they feel like they are part of the organization. Also making sure that the job descriptions that you're putting out there are accurate. So too many times we see that people recycle job descriptions year after year, and yet the job duties have changed, the roles have evolved, and if that happens, the workers often will get into the roles and then realize that they are different than was advertised, which can burn a lot of goodwill with the workers. Making sure that you respond to all candidates is also really important. I have done recruiting before, and I know this can be a pain when you know that it's a hard no, but it really does go a long way with candidates. Because these workers do talk. And so making sure that you're treating even the candidates that are absolutely not qualified, making sure that you're getting back to them. And then avoiding promises you can't keep. One thing that I was talking about yesterday on the housing webinar was we hear far too often from workers that they are overpromised on their housing. The pictures have been enhanced, the details that are included were over exaggerated or embellished. And then when they get to the housing, it's a letdown, it's a disappointment. And again, you're burning goodwill with your workers when we've seen a lot more success where even if the housing isn't up to the standard that you'd like it to be, if you're being honest with the workers and setting those expectations, they're much more likely to, you know, feel in the loop and feel okay about the housing that you've provided to them. All right. So again, don't forget about retention. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. It's so much easier to retain your staff than to hire and train. And so this also will allow for a better culture. If you're able to retain these people, they kind of become your best referral source and kind of your cheerleaders. If they're happy and they stick around, then they are able to continue on that culture. And also they can help with training so that when you do have to bring on new workers, the people around them are able to help with that training and take some of the load off as well. So just closing the loop, make sure you're talking with the workers about next season before they leave. So we see a lot of the time, and we recommend if the end of your season is getting near, or even you're past the midway mark, start talking with your workers about next year. And a lot of employers now are making job offers for the following season or the following year before the current season ends. So that's something that your organization should look at. And then even during the off season, make sure you're keeping in touch. Make sure you're engaging them, make sure they know what's going on at the organization, and make sure they feel like they're still very much part of your team and that you haven't forgotten about them, because that's something that they'll remember when they are gearing up for your season to come around again. So some more tips and best practices. Make sure you're using a variety of staffing options. And consider those international workers. But as Keith mentioned, if you're looking at H-2B visas, you need to plan a lot. Plan ahead of time, plan with your managers, plan your budget. It does take a lot of research, planning, strategy. And so, you know, don't wait too long to begin that process. Also, look at recruiting as a year-round activity. As I mentioned, there are times where recruiting ramps up, but generally speaking, we're seeing employers recruit year-round. And so if you're not doing that, you are missing out on candidates, you're missing out on these opposite season partners, and you're really not setting your organization up for success. Passive recruiting will doom you. So if you are just kind of hanging out, not doing all that you can throughout the year, and just kind of hoping that, you know, your workers have had a positive experience and will come back, that may not really work out in your favor. Also, remembering to involve the managers, keeping the candidates in mind and engaging with them after you make the offer. So not just making an offer and then hoping they show up the first day. One thing that we hear a lot is when employers do that, when they make an offer and then they don't engage with the candidates up until the hire date, they lose them. So just making sure to really carry through that recruiting process through the hire date so that you're not losing candidates in that window. And then also having a large network, including those that are outside of your regular network. So Seasonal Connect can really help you with that as well. And so what is Seasonal Connect and how can it help you? On the next slide, we're just going to play a very quick 60-second video so that I'm not talking at you about it for 10 minutes, and it will give you a quick high-level overview of what Seasonal Connect is.
Yeah, it's also going to allow us to give you an opportunity to understand what we're doing with the association. All right, let's see if this works.
Welcome to Seasonal Connect, a robust community of hospitality employers and workers ready to hire. Our database includes thousands of international and American workers, many with hospitality experience. With the help of our detailed search functionality, you can staff your busy season in one easy-to-use online platform. Post open positions to your Seasonal Connect profile, or link to job postings from other sites and let workers reach out to you directly. Create lasting recruiting partnerships with employers that have opposite busy seasons that can help fill open roles and increase worker retention. Members can also enjoy virtual and in-person events to network, develop connections, and solve challenges together. Seasonal Connect is the only staffing tool that is simple to adopt and will connect you to the right workers and employers to fill your jobs. Start hiring today at seasonalconnect.com.
So that's a high-level overview of what Seasonal Connect is, but let's talk about just the main goals of what Seasonal Connect does. The first is, and the core of Seasonal Connect is connecting employers with those opposite season partners. So, there is a database there of hundreds and hundreds of employers that are seasonal. You're able to go into the platform and search for exactly what you want, including, what their season is, when their dates are, to look at, how close can you get to, aligning with their dates and not overlapping or not having a gap. And you're also able to look at a myriad of things, from what they pay for wages, what they do for housing, the size of their organization. And so you're able to really look at your options for partners and get to know them and make those relationships.
So just like Carly was saying, you can go employer to employer with recruiting. We also have the opportunity for you to go directly to the workers. You can post jobs. You can link your jobs to your external job postings so you don't have to duplicate the work. You can tell the workers, are you looking for Americans? Are you looking for J1s? Are you looking for H2Bs? You can even say, are you looking for those in-country H2Bs because you want to avoid the cap? It gives you a lot of opportunities to narrow in on what you're actually hiring for in your job postings.
Our third goal is really to bring the workers to you. So, and this is both American seasonal workers and international workers. Right now, there's over 42,000 workers that are in the platform. They're actively looking for jobs. They can go and apply for jobs through the platform, and you can search for them. So if you're looking for a specific kind of worker, you can do that in addition to the employer-to-employer recruiting.
And then one of the biggest pieces for us is it's so much more than just a staffing platform. It also allows you to collaborate with others and also just learn so much. You can find out, what are other employers paying? What are they doing about housing? What are they doing about benefits? Any question you have, are they still requiring proof of COVID vaccines, background checks, anything that you need help with? Also, sometimes just understanding, that the problems you're facing aren't your fault, aren't just your property's fault, that others are experiencing them as well. So collaboration is huge. We do events, both virtual and in person. We have a message board. We have our own private LinkedIn group. We do a lot to get the employers talking. We do virtual speed dating. We do roundtables. There's a lot going on so that employers get to know one another and help one another.
So if you do want to sign up, you can go to seasonalconnect.com. We'll touch on it in a couple slides.
Carly, let's do it now. I'm going to skip ahead and then we'll go backwards.
Sure. Okay. There is a special discount for the VRLTA members, so you will get 10% off the monthly fees. The discount code you're going to want to use is VRLTA23 at checkout, and that will apply the 10% off the monthly fees.
Because it's really cool. It's a really easy to use platform. The community piece is massive. It's like, with the discount, I think it's like $89 a month. It's very, very inexpensive on purpose. We want this to be accessible for you so that you can use it as a resource. All right. So in closing, I'm going to do this slide and then feel free to write any questions in the chat as we go. How do you plan for future seasons, right? How do you solve this ongoing staffing crisis? That some of the statistics Carly said at the beginning were really important, right? The hospitality schools are still seeing a decrease in enrollment. the workers are still going to other areas. They're going to the gig economy, they're going into manufacturing, they're going elsewhere. How do you stay competitive in this thing where it now seems like a multi-generational issue, not just like multi-year issue? And I think it goes back to the slide that Carly said at the beginning, early on, which is you need to not put all of your eggs into one basket. You need to diversify your staffing strategy. You need to be out there and doing things. And it's partly, you know, looking at that retired community, looking at the differently abled community, looking at the recently incarcerated, and looking at internationals. The more that you are having multiple ways of getting the pipeline going into your property, the more successful you'll be, combined with retention. Because your workers, not only by keeping them around, you won't have to fill empty positions, but they are the best recruiting sources for you, right? When they tell their friends, hey, come work at this, come work here, it's a great place, that goes so much further than any of the initiatives you're going to do. So really look at different options. If you have any questions for us, we're always happy to talk. Also, again, on the community piece with Seasonal Connect, this is one of the things we talk about a lot. You know, what are people doing about different aspects of their staffing? What are they doing to make sure that they're staffed for next month, next week, next year? But that's kind of diversify. I think that's the biggest tip we're giving you. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Also, our contact information is here as well. But again, thank you so much for allowing us to be part of your association and your community, and for allowing us to talk today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much, Carly, as well, for you guys going over all of that information today. It was a lot of really great stuff. Like I had mentioned at the top, we did record this webinar, so it'll be available, and all of the resources that Keith and Carly had kind of referred to throughout the presentation will be included in a follow-up email sent to this, as well as posted on VRLTA.org, as well as the discount information that they mentioned during the presentation as well. So if nobody has any last minute questions, I wanted to say once again, thank you to Keith, Carly, Hanya, and the rest of the Seasonal Connect team for taking the time to meet with us today.
Thank you very much for having us and for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Everyone have a good one.
You too.
You too.